This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, Oshan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko Moreno leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Puskás says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. This is, I guess, kind of the second episode of this feature that we're trying to start up with on Fridays, where I get together with Niko Moreno and potentially other Sounder at Heart contributors, and we sort of just talk about the news of the week, what we observed at training. We didn't have any training that we observed this week, but Niko is with me, and we're going to talk about the game, the preseason game that the Sounders played on Thursday, and go from there. Niko, welcome back.
Hey, what's going on, Jeremiah? Audience, excited to be on. I kind of feel like I had a week of training. I obsessed and watched way too many times the exact same 90 minutes broken down in 45 minutes, two groups for the Sounders. So I guess that's what happens when I don't go to practice like I do every day. I just obsess and try to figure out what I can add or bring out of, a stream way over there in Marbella, Spain.
Although, I suppose we got more out of this, of watching this game on a stream, at least in terms of the performances, than we would get from a week of training where we're having to kind of look from a distance. We didn't get to talk to anyone, as obviously, but we did get to learn a few things about players. So let's just start by talking about that game. The Sounders played Puskás Akadémia, which is a team, if you're like me, you probably hadn't heard of before this, but turns out they're like the best team in Hungary right now. Maybe not, they're a team that's competing for a Champions League spot. I'll say that. And I don't know exactly a whole lot about this team, but my understanding is they played a mixed group. The Sounders played a mixed group. There was a bunch of their starters that came in the second half. The Sounders had most of their starters in the first half, but they were also missing a few guys. So, Niko, just the Sounders won the game 2-0. They got goals from Pedro de la Vega and Jordan Morris. Danny Musovski had a goal as well, but it was waved off for offside. What were your overall impressions from this game, Niko?
I was encouraged by it, of course, regardless of how known this team really is in Hungary, and it is. I did some research, tried to look at some of the players individually, obviously via Google, because I don't know many of the players, but it seems like it's a competitive team. So even if they were, let's say, the worst team, the things I want to look for is concepts of the game module, series of passes, concepts on decision-making from certain players, the way the team builds out of the back, the way they at times were direct, and specifically to certain players, right? Sharpness, fitness, clinicalness in front of goal, decision-making, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So, with that said, I thought that this group looked better than and I watched the streams of most games of last season. So if I was to compare the execution of what I thought the game plan was, I saw this team a lot sharper. Everyone in that first team looked comfortable on the ball. There was a couple standouts. I thought Pedro de la Vega was excellent. I thought he was not excellent. I thought he was very good. And I thought that he stood out. I have gotten certain people telling me that I am marketing this player and that I am marketing all. I mean, what I said is that he looked good because he did. I mean, he was a player
He
that
did
was
look good. What is there to say? Well, I don't even understand the counter argument to that.
I don't, man. And you guys heard me be critical and understand that the player was injured last season and yada, yada, yada. So I don't going to explain myself to anyone, but I thought in 45 minutes of the very first game of 2025,
Exactly.
he looked good, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
I mean,
going off of.
I'm not saying that this proves that he's going to be a superstar or anything, but if you're looking at 45 minutes of his first preseason game against literally, they could have been playing the Sounders Academy, but they were playing an
Yes.
actual professional team who isn't, they are in mid-season. They've been off for about a month, so it's not exactly, it's not exactly their mid-season form, I wouldn't say, but I don't know what else you can ask for. The guy had a goal, a nice goal. He had an assist, a really nice assist, and he hit a ball off the crossbar. I mean, I think he did everything you could have possibly asked for. That doesn't mean anything in terms of what he's going to do this year, but he looks fitter. He looks sharper. He looks like he knows where his teammates are going to go. And he had the final product as well. So again, this doesn't mean that Pedro de la Vega is going to be, a 10-10 guy, but it certainly suggests that he's off to a good start.
Yeah, and I don't know, like you said, how you argue that, but you know what?
Yeah.
It's all right. I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. That's exactly what I wanted to say, is that he looked good. I thought that the way he was bringing the ball down at midfield was excellent. The way this 3-5-2 or 3-4-1-1,
I would say like a 3-4-2-1 is what I've been calling it.
yeah, there you go. 3-4-2-1 sounds good as well. The formation, I felt like it's fitting to certain players, and I think Pedro was one of them. He got a lot of freedom. He was checking in. He was bringing the ball down. Whenever the team played direct, I thought that into pressure. He seemed like there's a very well-designed way of players laying that ball down, whether it was Pedro, whether it was Jordan. So I like the game module, if you will, that I saw. The Danny Leyva was very good as well. I thought he benefits from this sort of formation. I thought he was positive on the ball. And again, were there bad passes from both of these players? Yes. Pedro had a couple of moments where he could have done something differently, where he held the ball a little too long. Danny as well. But what I'm saying is that those are the players that stood out for me. Yeah, first preseason game, I thought those guys stood out. JP, not just the assist, but the movement, the distribution. There's one point where he makes this clinical, exact switch on the ball right where he wants it. You can tell that he's synced in, and that's what you can ask for in the very first game of 2025. So those were some of the standards for me. Yeimar physically just dominating people. He had a couple of boo-boos, of course. He had one where he holds the ball a little too long, but he's so strong and fast that he gets taken from the ball, but then he just bullies whoever takes him from the ball, and then he tries to boot it out. So physically, Yeimar looks good. So all in all, I was encouraged by the first 45 minutes. That very first group, I thought it was good. What were your thoughts, Jeremiah?
I would agree with you. I don't think there was any real big red flags for me in the first half. Like we can nitpick a little. Sebastian Gomez, here's a player who hasn't really had any first team minutes on any, with the Defiance or anyone, or I'm sorry, with the Open Cup or anything else. He looked like it maybe a little out of place, but it was mainly because he just didn't touch the ball a lot. Similarly, Paul Arriola didn't get on the ball a lot. But other than that, like no one was making mistakes. No one looked out of their depth. No one looked like they were in trouble. I thought Stuart Hawkins was another player who, this is a pretty good opportunity for him to get some minutes with first team. He looked perfectly like he belonged. The same thing with Kalani Kosa-Rienzi, who is not on a first team contract right now, probably facing an uphill battle to get one. But I think he showed once again that if you put him with first team players, he can do stuff. He can get up and down the line. He is a player whose athleticism is sort of built for this formation where you are sending wingbacks high. And, I think if there's a question that I came away from this, and I'll agree with you that I thought Pedro de la Vega was probably the Sounders' best player. But what I think is notable about the performance is that it was really two 10s playing in this game. And there are two 10s who, probably aren't going to play together a lot. It was, Gomez was playing on one side and De La Vega was playing on the other. They were both sort of playing in those half spaces. Yeah. And I don't know where, I think if there's a caveat to De La Vega's performance, it's that I don't know how often he'll actually get to play there. Even if they play this formation, presumably those are positions where Jesus Ferreira and Albert Rusnak are going to mostly be playing, and neither one of them were fit enough to play in this game. For what it's worth, my understanding is they're probably going to play in the next game. But so, yeah, it wasn't a perfect illustration, but there was a lot more to like than not like, I think is my big takeaway.
Yeah, and I thought Kalani stood out, and this was another player that people were like, "Oh, I heard the coaching staff screaming at him to get back." Yes, I realized that. I understand that he wasn't perfect in his trigger points and when to come back. Look, I get it. But I highlighted his name because I feel like he deserved to be highlighted. I thought that he was good defensively. He was very active. Offensively was his best attribute in this particular game. He gets a shot on goal that barely misses. He had an assist to a shot that gets blocked by the keeper, Pedro de la Vega. Shoots the ball. The referee ends up calling it a goal kick, but I thought it was a corner. So he was very good. I thought he was in all the right spaces, specifically on offense. I thought he understood his role. And yes, there were moments that he maybe came back a little late, but Yamar's there for that. That's what Yamar does. He is your whiteout. He is your correction guy. He has the speed, the knowledge to when he comes to that sort of thing. But I like the fact that, to what I believe Brian and this coaching staff want to do, they want to be aggressive with this 3-4-2-1, right? I mean, they really want to get numbers forward. They want to get the center backs involved. You can tell that the center backs want to get forward with the ball. And, man, that's just all good things to me.
All good things. I agree. The other really nice thing to see was Pedro de la Vega setting up Jordan Morris. It was sort of a blind ball that de la Vega played Morris into space with. It was the second time he actually tried that play in the game. This was really a perfect pass. Morris times his run perfectly. And then he made a nice cutback. And it's possible that the shot deflected off a defender. I wasn't sure the replays were that clear. The sound of it made it sound like it deflected off a defender, but the Sounders had a replay of it from like the field level, and I just couldn't tell where the ball. Either way, it was a nice move. It was a confident left-footed shot. I thought it was a really nice sequence all around, and it was just, again, good to see De La Vega trusting the run of Morris. Good to see Morris trusting that De La Vega was going to play that ball. It was just a nice sequence. And I was really happy with what I saw in the game. It was fun to, the second half, we can talk about the second half. Very different. It was sloppier. You have a lot more players who aren't used to playing together. I guess more of the first team players from Puskás were in the game. But, all that said, it was 0-0. It wasn't like the Sounders got played off the field. And the Sounders did have a goal that got called off. It was a very tight offside call. We had someone in our Discord who looked at it and did all the line drawing and all that kind of stuff. And they said it looked like he was just barely off. But, it's one of those plays where if there's VAR and it's called onside in the game, it probably doesn't get overturned, and it's not going to get overturned the other way either. But, it was good to see Musovski hit the back of the net. Musovski was, I guess he was offside a couple times in this game, but it was good to see him. It's just good to see him put, anytime that Danny Musovski can hit the back of the net, I think that's good for his confidence. And, the Sounders are probably going to need some minutes from him. So it's good to see that. I don't know if I had any other big takeaways from the second half other than, Christian looked okay. Obed looked, maybe not quite as sharp as you would like, but, Josh was active. He wasn't necessarily clean as a right center back. What were anything that you thought about the second half?
Yeah, I want to touch very quickly on the Pedro Vega pass to Jordan. That's the thing. I mean, not only did he try it this year, he tried it last year. That no-look first touch pass is part of his repertoire, part of his tool shed, and he has put players in very good positions even last year with that first look pass. And so I was very encouraged by that. I think that him and Jordan are working on fixing the kinks and adjusting their movements. But when that is right, man, look, and this is coming from a guy that was not loving Jordan at the 9 last season, and obviously he did very well, and, I grew into it, but I really do believe that if him and Vega can get in the same spot, in the same page, he can put Jordan in a very good position. So I liked it. I thought that the pass was great, and I think that it's definitely something they're working on, and they're going to continue to work through the season. In the second half, yeah, you're right. I mean, it wasn't just sloppy; it was slow. I thought that neither one of the fullbacks, including Alex Roldan, which worries me a little bit, did not give the team enough width from the wingback positions. Trey, you could tell he's just a little raw, but when it comes to Alex, maybe it was the players on the field, or I'm not sure what it was, but he just did not look sharp from his position. If there was anyone that was doing their thing, if you will, was Georgie Benungu. And even Georgie wasn't sharp, right? He wasn't effective, wasn't productive, but he's always fun to watch, right? I mean, scissor here, pull back there. I'm going to get in front of you. I'm, being dangerous. He got a couple of shots that were blocked. I thought Obed in that sequence where he does a great move on top of the 18. He opens up space. He either shoots that or he passes it, and it's a way better situation. He doesn't do that. He holds the ball too long. He lays that off to Georgie. Georgie shoots it, gets blocked. But I like Georgie in general. I mean, the guy, he's hard to not like. Because even when he's not productive, he's just fun to watch, right? I mean, he just looks fast, confident. I mean, he's just there. So he's one of the guys that stood out for me. Jackson Reagan, very poised, very good on the ball. I don't put a lot of stock into the defensive part of it when a team that didn't seem as informed as this Puskás team looked, but I thought that he did well in several locations. I thought Snyder Burnell had moments where I can see what the coaching staff see, where he understands the game. He gets into those half spaces. He's a very smart player, and you could tell. But whenever he gets on the ball, he might not be all the time, especially in this game. But when he does, I like what he does with the ball. So those are a couple of the very few uh, I don't know if you want to call them like long shots, but I thought those were the guys that maybe on a loophole. And again, watching this game way more than I should have. Those are the guys that really come up to me.
I think that's all fair. I think if anything, it gives us some insight into where the Sounders see their sort of depth chart right now. And it tells me that Stuart Hawkins might be closer to first team minutes than I originally thought, which, good for him. If he can be the primary backup to Jackson Reagan as at center back, that's great. Similarly, if, I think one of the things that makes this game tough is there's obviously missing pieces. Reed Baker Whiting wasn't available. Paul Rothrock wasn't available. Jesus Ferreira wasn't available. Alvaro Rusnak was not available. Kim Keehee, who, by the way, today announced on his Instagram that he's coming to Seattle. We'd already confirmed it from the Sounder side, but it's always nice until they announce it. It's always good to have more confirmation. But, those are 5 players who are all going to be not necessarily starters, but would have been in the mix for this group. So I don't want to get too out over our skis in terms of projecting the depth chart, but I thought that, it to me says that maybe Kalani Kosarienzi is a little closer to a first team contract than I might have assumed, especially with Braudilia Rodriguez leaving the team and that opening up a spot on the supplemental roster. I think there's a little bit more of an opening there. And so, these are all data points, right? And that's all we can really do with preseason is collect data points and try to project out from that. And, again, most of what we saw in this game were positives. I think it's trending correctly. No one got hurt. That's always positive. I think the players that played in the first half all got 45 minutes. The players that played in the second half all got 45 minutes. There were no subs. And then we'll get more data points when the Sounders get back on the field on Friday? Is that right? A week from today?
Yep, I believe that's the case.
Yeah. So, it's all moving in that direction. Anything else from this game that stood out to you?
Nope, no from the game. To be honest, I think we touched on all the main components that were worth talking about. I do wish that Daddy Masovsky was a little bit more influential and that he gave me a little bit more confidence at that position. I heard you on Lobbin Scorchers, and maybe the U22 spot should be used on a 9. I was thinking more of a fullback or a wing back, but I look at those strikers and it does make me nervous. It does give me jitters on where, God hope not, but if something does happen to either Jordan or Ferreira, you just don't really have any short answers there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair concern. What we're seeing, I think, in Musovski is that he's not someone who's going to get a lot of touches. Like, his value is really going to be extracted from what he does in the penalty box. And if he's getting on to the end of stuff, he'll look good. And if he's not, he won't look good. And that's sort of, hopefully he's able to get on the end of more stuff than he did in this game. This wasn't maybe the best showcase for him, but that's why I say it's good for him to just see the ball hit the back of the net, even if it doesn't count. It was a well-taken shot. I thought he did an okay job trying to time his run. It was a similar situation like where, you talked about Obed waiting a little too long to set up Georgie. It was kind of a similar situation where he looked like he waited a beat too long before playing it into Musovski. If he had played it a beat earlier, Musovski's probably onside and he probably still finishes it. But yeah, anyway, the Sounders' next game is going to be on Friday. It's going to be against Aalborg, I believe, right? They're the team from, the Danish team, which, that will be probably a little bit better of a test. Denmark is one of the better leagues once you get outside the top 5, it's one of the better leagues in Europe. So they will be a little bit more of a test. I would imagine we'll get a little bit more of a run out from the first team players, and then they'll play 2 games on February 5th, one against IFK Norrköping, which is I think a Swedish team, and then Hammarby, which is definitely a Swedish team. And then, of course, they'll come back to Seattle and play Louisville City at Long Acres on February 12th before CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then otherwise, it was not the most active week. I mentioned Braudilio Rodriguez. That I don't think that news had been, that hadn't come out yet when we recorded, because we recorded on Friday. We found out I think you found out on Sunday that he didn't travel. And then I was able to confirm that essentially the Sounders had waived him. The Sounders formally announced that, I believe, on Tuesday. So I don't know. Do you make much of the Braudilio Rodriguez situation, whether for him or for what it means for the roster?
I do, just because it tells me that there is a certain level of, I don't want to call it complacency, but maybe confidence in their attacking players, because Braudilio was a guy that was interesting, and he never got out there. Me and you got to see a lot more of him than maybe most people did in between training and obviously Tacoma Defiance. I wanted to see him out there. I really did.
Yeah.
But I understand that with the formation change and with the players that you brought in, he was probably not going to get a lot of play time. So it made sense to just waive him, allow him the opportunity to get somewhere else, and then you also gave yourself an international spot, I believe.
The international roster spot, I think, is what really is this is about. Is the Sounders essentially made a decision that whatever Braudilio's upside was, they couldn't really gamble what is now their only international roster spot on a player who I don't know this for certain, but I can only imagine that, this is a player who only made 6 appearances with the Defiance last year. He struggled to stay healthy. He had a couple different injuries, which is really awful luck for him. I feel bad for him. And I can only assume that what happened is they figured they would bring him into camp this year, see how he looks. And if he didn't blow him away, they knew they could sort of cut him loose. And I just sort of have to assume that he didn't blow him away. He looked fine to me, but I didn't get a really good look at him. And I think it's probably better for everyone if they just give him a chance to go sign somewhere else. I mean, the reality is that he's 25 and doesn't have any first team minutes at any like he hasn't played first division football in his career at all. And that's a tough player to hold an international roster spot for.
No, and I talked to a couple of sources, and I thought that he was someone that could maybe fill in at striker, but
I think that's fair.
But apparently, and this was news to me, because again, I thought that, I don't know, 15 goals that were Tacoma Defiance record, and I probably don't watch enough Tacoma Defiance as I should. I know you do. Maybe I thought that was a lot more. I thought he had a little bit more weight, and they did not seem to think, according to a couple of sources, that he could fill in that position at the 9. Whether it was through the new formation or concepts, but they just did not think that he could do enough to just be a striker and not just a player that could do other things. So, hey, look, the best to him, hoping that he gets somewhere else, and that what he did for Tacoma Defiance and, everything he did throughout his time here with the organization gets him somewhere else. But it definitely, I get why he was waived off now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that he played some striker at Defiance, but that was not his primary position. I mean, he was really a midfielder. Now, I think he could have started probably anywhere across the midfield band, but so maybe in a pinch he could play striker, but he's not a guy who's stretching the lines. He was more of a player who was good with the ball at his feet. He does have really good technical skills. He can shoot for sure, but I not really a prototypical striker. And he was worth. I think that with the Sounders, my understanding is that the Sounders sort of took a flyer on him when they brought him in to Defiance, and he played so well that they sort of had to sign him. I don't think that he was necessarily ever a player who the talent evaluators were smitten over. And sort of I think the reality was last year was sort of his chance to see what he could do. And, it's a tough break, but the guy got hurt and he didn't get on the field very much. And he got hurt multiple times. I think that was the other thing that made it tough. He had one game with the Defiance last year where he had a couple goals and an assist, and he looked really good in that game. He played like 20 odd minutes. He almost had a hat trick, and then he didn't do anything else the rest of the year. He played 4 or 6 more games after that, and he just struggled to even make an impact. So, it's tough. I don't think I think it was mostly a fitness issue, a health issue, but it's too bad. I would have liked him to work out. I think he was a great story as well. But moving on from him, it does open up some room on the roster. My assumption is that the international spot will be used on a U22. Are you hearing anything as far as what direction they might go with that U22 spot?
I have not directly, right? I mean,
yeah.
What I've been able to find out is that they're looking either at a complete striker, third type of end of field sort of player, and or a fullback. I mean, it's one of the two. So both you and I have touched on both. You want a striker?
I've heard they might be looking at a defensive midfielder too. I think they're looking everywhere.
No, I mean, it is. I mean, Craig said that they were open for all 3 positions.
Right.
But I do believe that because Josh, yes, he's playing center back. You play him back there, and that's fine.
Cover.
But you do have cover, exactly, right? You do have cover. I think that Bernal is a guy that they're looking at pretty seriously. I think that Sebastian Gomez, just the fact that he started in this first 45 today, set some precedent of what they believe the player could provide. So to me, striker, fullback, that's where the money's at right now. I have heard that there are teams interested in Cody Baker, potentially for a loan. So we'll see where that goes. But if you do lose out on Cody, you got to replace that somehow. Right. So again, I think striker, we're very light at, meaning the Sounders by we. And then at fullback, you could always use the next one.
Right. Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, it'll be interesting. I think the most exciting idea is that they would go out and try to sign a striker.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sadietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
You're seeing it's what I think is interesting and is sort of a good level setting is there's been a bunch of U22 signings around the league in the last week or two. Look at the resumes of these players. Almost none of them have great resumes. They're usually like some of them are interesting, but not a lot of players with a lot of first team minutes and certainly not a lot with a lot of first team goals. You have to, I think what I'm saying is most of the time you're going out and you're signing a project. You're not signing a finished, you're not finding, signing someone who's finished and ready to jump into the lineup right away. You're looking for upside. And, as disappointing as Leo Chu was at times, the reality is that he was still one of the more successful U22s on a, production basis to come into the league. I mean, that's just sort of the expectations you have to set. We all look, I think the problem is that you look at a Dejan Joveljic, who is like maybe a designated player with his next contract. And you go like, well, that's what you should be looking for in a U22. It's like, yeah, you should, but that's hard to find.
No, it is. It really is. And look, people people ask me like, oh, you know what? Hey, Austin is doing all these things, and they're bringing in Nicholas Duberski, and he's a guy that seems to be. Look, I get it, but he's had one season with over 1,800 minutes, and that's it. I mean,
and not a lot of production. And not a lot of
production.
They paid $2.5 million for this guy, and he doesn't have almost any. He doesn't. I mean, you look at his stats; it doesn't jump off the page. Like you said, he's got one season where he even played 1,800 minutes.
No, and look, I know him because I follow the league. I talk to scouts. I talk to agents. So I heard the name. I knew who he was, but did he like pop off the page where I'm like, oh my God, they're getting this guy? No, that's
Right.
not that guy. So that's where I feel like people, man, at times they feel like, oh my, X team is doing so much. They're being so active. They're getting all these players. It doesn't usually just reflect in the numbers and in the wins. So let's just give the Sounders the benefit of the doubt. I thought that they've been smart with their money, smart with their business. I think this is a better team that people give maybe, the benefit of the doubt to. I feel like this is a decent team, man. And again, the fact that I feel better about this squad when I see them play than I did in 2024. If you take my word for anything, should encourage you the way it encourages me.
Yeah, I mean, and to that end, I published a survey that we ran on Sounder at Heart that we published it this week, and I was kind of surprised. People, we hear a lot of negative commentary both in the comment section on social media, wherever, but we had something like 1,400, almost 1,500 people respond to this survey, and generally speaking, people are kind of positive about the outlook. They expect the Sounders to win a trophy. They expect them to at least equal last year's point total, maybe even compete for the top spot in the West. People are not as, I would say they're mid on Craig Weibel's performance, but they're pretty positive, generally speaking, about the offseason. It's not nearly as gloom and doom as it might seem, I guess is my point. And I think that it's easy to forget that there are a lot of people out there who are actually reasonable about their expectations.
And I think the key word is that they are Sounder a hard audience and readers and followers, because there is a lot of shit and garbage content creators right now that are way off the board when it comes to the Sounders moves. And look, and I hope we talk about Kim Ki-hee here soon.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Sounders are putting together a pretty solid squad that will not let you down, that might not, be in all the highlights, and he might not be in all the talk shows or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like this squad can win some games and the experience and the togetherness and the cohesiveness of the roster build of this Sounders team, I feel like can really surprise some people in 2025.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you mentioned Kim Ki-hee today went on Instagram and said, basically the idea was it was a farewell to Ulsan fans, basically saying thank you for your time there. Well, I don't need to read it. It's a pretty long statement, but we translated it on Blue Sky. If you are really interested in seeing it, it's on the Sounder Heart Blue Sky account. But among the things he says is that he's gonna, I've decided to take a new challenge. Recently received an offer from the Sounders in MLS and decided to return to America for a second life. Thank you very much to everyone at Ulsan, including the director and all the fans. So there you have it. Kim Ki-hee has essentially announced that he's returning to the Sounders. Again, you and I have both reported that this was a done deal. But again, always good to get confirmation from the person himself.
No, of course. And I'm glad that maybe whoever is skeptical about you or I's sources, now they can figure out that he is coming back.
Right, exactly.
Look,
we kind of know what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We might know. We might have some insight on things. So you know what? Cool. I like it. But in terms of what it does for the team, I heard a couple of people call this a shit move, and you guys are complete paid by the team if you think this is a good move. And you know what? I get it. You're upset. This is not someone who is playing in the Premier League or South America. That's all right. Look, I've been there. I have doubted some moves by the Sounders because of where they were playing. But now that I have been, I don't know, 14, 15 years in, watching and following this team consistently, I understand where they're going. And I do believe that a guy that has been having consistent minutes for the top K1 team, Korean League team that has poise, experience, the physical attributes, the IQ, can provide a really good depth piece. I mean, you just heard us talk about Stu and Atencio and Yeimar and all these players that are going to be playing a center back. I thought Jay Bell looked pretty decently, pretty good in this week's preseason game. So when you add a player like Kim Ki-hee, you're just adding depth, you're adding experience, you're adding a player that if you need to rotate, you know what he's going to bring you. So Jeremiah and I are not sitting here telling you that we are bringing in the next big thing, but we are saying that is a depth piece that is going to give you some options in 2025 where there's going to be a lot of tournaments, a lot of moments. I think it's a good move.
I do too. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that the Sounder, essentially he's taking Nathan's spot on the roster, but he costs about a fifth as much as Nathan would have. Nathan was making about $500,000 last year. My understanding is Kim Ki-hee is going to be something closer to $100,000. So he's not taking up a big chunk of roster the way that Nathan was, relatively speaking. And so when you're talking about a player at that salary level, you usually don't get a player with the experience and still, frankly, the ability of Kim Ki-hee. Ideally, he's only going to play a limited number of games. Like if he ends up playing 20 or 30 games, you've got bigger problems than you were going to solve with that roster spot anyway. So although he could probably play 20 games without too much trouble. But point being, this is not a player who's coming in and you're not signing him instead of signing a DP. You're not signing him instead of even a TAM player. You're talking about a player who is making, much closer to the homegrown players on the roster than anyone else. So when you're talking about that level, I think this is a coup. I think this is a really clever signing. And I think one of the consistent things we've seen this offseason is that the Sounders were able to get a whole bunch of players to come here on lower than their market value. And I think it's because they want a chance to win. They want a chance to be able to compete for, to play in a tournament like the Club World Cup. They want to, be in a winning environment, and they want to be around a group of guys who seem to enjoy each other's company, none of which can you just sort of take for granted as a given virtually anywhere in this league or anywhere in soccer, frankly.
No, absolutely. And that's something that I don't know, as a fan, you should understand is that the resources they're using to create a roster that can sustain a heavy and challenging 2025 season should be applauded. And if there are 15% of you that are wondering why this team is not getting ready to win the Club World Cup, unless Holland and Enzo Fernandez were willing to take pay cuts to come to the Sounders, there was never going to be a universe where the Sounders were going to be protagonists in the Club World Cup. So if you are giving Brian Smetzer or this organization shit, and I'll say it because it's a podcast, because they decided to tell you that they're building a roster to win MLS Cup and not Club World Cup, is because they're being honest. They're not feeding you lies, because that's what you need to do. Because if you wanted to win a Club World Cup, you would have to do the unthinkable. So you prepare your team to win the tournaments that you should win, and you give yourself a chance to be good at a Club World Cup by creating a design of play, a soccer module, and getting your players right for that tournament. But you need to do that within your own parameters, and that's where you get this sort of player. So all of that and all of my rant for all of you to just know that, yes, maybe this team is not going to be what a lot of you thought, because maybe you thought there were going to be bigger players coming in this season. But I think that for what was available, man, I'm encouraged by this squad.
Yeah. And speaking of the Club World Cup, it's been interesting to see. I guess I thought the hospitality tickets for the Club World Cup went on sale, but I guess it was the World Cup tickets went for sale, and they're looking for $8,000.
Holy crap.
It is funny how quickly all these international games came in. I was excited as anyone about all these, both the Club World Cup and the World Cup coming to Seattle, and I'm still reasonably excited about it. But man, the cost of these tournaments for fans is outrageous. It is going to be so expensive. We haven't really talked about it much on this podcast, but the tickets for the club, did you see the Sounders group stage games? You're talking at $100 minimum just to get in the door, but oftentimes even more than that to get deep. Like there's not even a lot of the good seats aren't even for sale yet, and they're charging $200, $300 for seats that are oftentimes not particularly good seats. I don't know. Are you hearing anything from people about reactions to costs of going to these games?
I haven't. A lot of the people that in my circle are investing in the Club World Cup specifically, they understand where the prize is. So I have a lot of River fans that are going to be going to I think it's River Inter Milan here.
Yep.
Game. They paid a pretty penny, and they're going to the River against the Japanese team that's also going to play here, so they don't mind. But when I hear the numbers, I mean, it is 1,000 plus, it is 800 plus. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah.
I thought that the World Cup tickets didn't go out until June, so I haven't heard anything about the World Cup tickets.
Yeah, I guess the it was just the hospitality tickets started going for sale, and it's I don't know. I think FIFA came in here with the idea that this was going to be a not just here, Seattle, but like into the United States with the idea that this was just going to be a chance to clean up in terms of prices. But it's been kind of depressing, frankly, to see how expensive it is to go to these games. But hopefully, you know, I don't know. They say these are dynamic prices, so maybe they start to come down when we get closer to the games. But I have a hard time telling anyone at this point, oh yeah, just go. You'll be fine. You'll love it. But yeah, it's dicey out there. All right. Well, I don't know. Do we have much else? There's there's all kinds of stuff going on in around the league and stuff. But with the Sounders, this was other than the game, it was a relatively quiet week, I would say. Anything you're looking forward to? Anything you're expecting you're looking forward to learning about in the next game?
I mean, yes, I do. Obviously, like everyone who is hearing this podcast is looking forward to seeing how Ferreira fits into
Yeah.
everything that we just discussed today, and can he coexist with Pedro de la Vega, whether it is in this formation or in the very safe, very default 3-2-3-1. I like to see it. I want to see Ferreira and Jordan Morris and De La Vega and Albert, all together. So I am looking forward to at some point seeing what that looks like under what the coaching staff sees going forward. Is Pedro de La Vega going to be a wingback instead of Alex or instead of whoever you want to put on the left side? Obviously Reed is hurt right now, but whoever you want to put on the on the left side. So all of those things is what I'm looking forward and why I'm excited about the preseason, because I do see the talent. I just don't know how it all fits and comes about together. I would like to see Georgie get more minutes, but I'm always, especially when it comes to MLS, I'm always going to lean to the side of put your most expensive with the highest potential players on the field. So can you fit him in there somehow as well? All of that, it's interesting to me. So I am looking forward to 1,000 things going on to the next game.
Yeah, I am with you. I think the Jesus Ferreira bit is probably going to be the most intriguing because we really don't know how he fits with this attack. Because is he going to play as a 9? I suspect that's not what he'll play in this game. Is he going to play underneath Jordan? I think that's a little bit more likely. But then how does that affect Albert Rusnak? And then how does that affect Pedro de la Vega? I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see a different formation in this game. I think we might see something more closer to what they did last year, where maybe Ferreira and de la Vega are ostensibly playing on the wing. But I think if there is a challenge, it's that I think all 4 of those players want to not necessarily occupy the same space, but the same parts of the field. Relatively speaking, like they want to be in the central third of the field, meaning they aren't, none of them are chalk on their boots wingers. They're all players who want to be somewhere near the middle of the park, I guess is what I'm saying. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it could be fluid, and then I think it's also important to keep in mind that the number of times where the Sounders actually put their best 11 on the field together might not be that high, because that's just sort of the nature of how things work in a normal year, especially in a year where there are a bunch of games. I guess I will add one more piece of news that came in today. It looks like Phoenix Rising may have jumped the gun a little bit and announced that there's only going to be 16 MLS teams in the U.S. Open Cup. I asked around and I confirmed that the Sounders are not going to be one of those 16 teams in the Open Cup. They are going to instead send the Tacoma Defiance to the Open Cup. That is not as far as I understand it, that's not a decision that the Sounders get to make. It's a decision that gets made between MLS and US Soccer. Do you have any reaction to the Sounders not being in the Open Cup this year?
Those are big news, Jeremiah, and I'm glad you shared that. We talked about it prior to getting on this call, and man, look, it's a little hard for me because I am not the guy that's gonna tell you that I would rather be in the Open Cup than in Leagues Cup,
Mhm.
because my idea of the game is always gonna be more global, and Leagues Cup gives you that international component. However, talking to as many fans as I've been able to talk to, and privileged to understand and hear the importance of a tournament that gives U.S. Soccer the I don't know, credibility and uh, understanding that we have in South America, to where it's enrooted, embedded in within you to say, hey, we grew up with this cup. We grew up with this tournament. This is what makes U.S. Soccer. I've heard that from people. And that talks to me. That talks to me hearing you say that. And going back to the tournaments that I grew up in, whether it was Copa Libertadores, Sudamericana, Intercontinental, whatever you want to call it, I hear you, Sounder fan, and it does make me a little bit saddened that those people that have been with the team, with this club, as long as they've have, now they have to, in one way or another, sacrifice this tournament because of a new era or of a new design to MLS in general. So I do have mixed feelings. I'm saddened for those fans. I do wish that there was a way that you could play all of these tournaments, especially when both you and I know that it's okay to bring up players from Tacoma Defiance
Right,
and
exactly.
call it your Sounder team. So I didn't feel like that was a necessity to just say, hey, you know what? No Sounders. It's going to be Tacoma Defiance. So I feel for both sides. Um, and I feel for the players because obviously they want to be part of this tournament. I've talked to quite a few of them that enjoy Open Cup, that enjoy those Starfire nights. So, man, it's just mixed feelings all around. I wish that there was a way that you could play all those tournaments in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they could theoretically. It's just that the powers that be don't seem to want to let them. But yeah, I mean, there is technically room on the schedule. There's nothing inherently conflicting about it. The Open Cup begins after the important parts of the Open Cup happen sort of between the semifinals of the CONCACAF Champions Cup and, or not the important parts, but the first few rounds of the Open Cup happen between the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals and the final. So and I don't think there's any dates that actually conflict, but it's a lot of games. And, you know, even without that, the Sounders are probably going to be playing at least 42 games without advancing in any games and without getting to the playoffs. So I understand the trade-off there. I'm bummed. I like the Open Cup. That said, I'm glad that the Defiance are going to be in the Open Cup. I think that, you know, at least for those first two rounds, I would imagine the Sounders will probably loan down a few players. And frankly, those lineups in the first couple rounds will probably look very similar to how they would have looked anyway, which I suppose makes it a little silly that they aren't going to play. But, you know, I do think it's a good opportunity for younger guys to get minutes. You know, it sounds like players who are on the supplemental roster will still be allowed to play in the Open Cup if the teams decide to loan them down. And, you know, hopefully people will still go out and watch Defiance play. This will be the first time since 2015 that a Sounders developmental team or a Sounders affiliate will be playing in this tournament. The Sounders 2, as people may remember, in 2015, Sounders 2 played the Portland Timbers 2, I think.
Yeah. I remember a couple of I think Andy was in that one team.
Yeah, Andy
maybe?
Craven and your
Franco
boy.
Navarro, Panamanian, Rossi,
Yeah,
Diego
Pablo
Rossi,
Rossi was in that
Pablo
one.
Rossi, Pablo Rossi. Yeah. Those are my
And then
guys.
I think they lost to RSL, if I remember correctly. And that was a game. I don't know if people remember this. This is getting into the weeds, but Pablo Rossi scored from like almost midfield in that game against RSL, if you remember that.
Hey, my guy still has a foot, man. He's out there coaching in Argentina. He just hit me up not too long ago that he wanted to come by and see what was going on here in Seattle. But he's still doing his thing, man. He still got a privileged foot. I'm telling you.
Oh my God, the guy had one of the best feet. I mean, he could hit a ball. I tell you, man, that guy was fun to watch.
Yeah, he was amazing, man. He's honestly astonished at the growth of Tacoma Defiance, the Sounders, MLS in general, man. You know, so that just tells you how far we've come.
Exactly.
Jeremiah, you know, us following this game as long as we have, and now those Pablo Rossi's, you know, they're astonished by the growth of the game.
I bet. Well, Niko, thanks again for joining me. Like I said, we're going to try to make this a staple of our coverage. We'll come up with a clever name to call this Friday show. But Niko, thank you. Where can people follow you other than, of course, Sounder at Heart? Where else can they follow you?
Yep, right now just at El Rolo NW at Pulso Sports on YouTube. We are hoping to gather a couple of new shows in English all around. So you can find my coverage there. Obviously, anytime that I am able to provide content through Sounder Hard, you'll find me here. But just thankful, man. Thank you for giving me this platform. Happy to give the fans hopefully some insight and some fun things to hear about when it comes to the Sounders, especially when, you know, we're losing a lot of big names in the podcast industry, and you know, I feel like this is something that the Pacific Northwest deserves and needs. So, man, I appreciate it very much.
All right, thank you for doing this, Niko. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, and I will give you one more pitch. If you like this type of coverage, if you are a fan of independent soccer media, I want to urge you to not just listen, but to actually become a member of Sounder at Heart. You can go onto our site. Memberships start as low as $25 for the year. I'm sure we'll play ads for the show for the memberships, but I do want to just remind everyone, the only way that this kind of coverage continues is if you support it, and supporting it does require a monetary element of that. So again, thank you for doing this, Niko. Thank you for listening. This is No Sadietes. We'll catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one.